Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am the host of Gaon International Model United Nations, Kim Da-ye.
And I am the co-host, Kim So-in. First of all, we want to thank all the teachers, parents, and honored guests for participating in this Gaon International Model United Nations in the midst of busy times.
International Model United Nations is a conference that various countries discuss and conclude an entente about international issues and make steady progress by proposing resolutions using actual international United Nations processing forms. This conference will be conducted by representatives from various countries to draw up a resolution that is favorable to their respective countries.
The agenda for the 6th Gaon International Model United Nations will be in the post-COVID-19 era, seeking multilateral cooperation for food security, and 8 countries are going to participate in the conference. Now, I would like to introduce the representatives of each country to you, and please greet them with big applause. First, I would like to introduce the delegates of the United States.
Delegates of People's Republic of China.
Delegates of Canada.
Delegates of the Republic of Korea.
Delegates of the Argentine Republic.
Delegates of the Federative Republic of Brazil.
Delegates of the Arab Republic of Egypt.
Delegates of the Republic of the Philippines.
And I want to introduce our chairwoman elected to this conference. Please greet her with big applause. Finally, we'll give you a preliminary explanation of the agenda.
Today, we are going to talk about the measures each country sought for food security in the post-COVID-19 era. On March 11, 2020, following the global spread of the new coronavirus, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, COVID-19, for the third time in history.
Despite Secretary General Gabriel's efforts to calm anxiety over the pandemic declaration, stressing that COVID-19 could be suppressed, the number of infected people in the international community has increased exponentially based on the high spread and rapid progress of the coronavirus. As a result, countries around the world have strengthened quarantine measures and immigration control, along with spurring vaccine development. However, even with these efforts, the coronavirus has not been easily alleviated. The continued spread has caused great damage to the world, and among them, we are able to confirm the economic damage the most.
As global import and export control to prevent the influx and spread of coronaviruses in each country lasted for a long time, the world's economy rapidly contracted like during the global economic Great Depression in the 1930s. In June 2020, the IMF published a modification of the World Economic Outlook report and predicted global economic growth at minus 4.9%. Moody's, an international credit rating agency, also announced in a macroeconomic outlook report that the G20's real gross domestic product will fall by 4.6%. This is a 0.6 percentage point downward revision from the growth forecast of -4% in April 2020.
The spread of COVID-19 seemed to gradually die down as research and development of vaccination was conducted, and rapid supply and inoculation progressed through the cooperation with the international community. However, there are still many confirmed cases around the world due to new mutant viruses and imbalance in supply and demand. We can discover the scars across all parts of our lives left by the long-lasting pandemic. Our lives have completely changed since COVID-19. For instance, there are hungers across countries, and it went harder to get a job, and masks became indispensable in our lives.
Among them, food security is one of the biggest issues that the world is paying attention to. According to the United Nations World Food Program, 265 million people in developing countries are now stuck in food insecurity, which is twice more than before pandemic. Particularly, about 30 countries, such as the Republic of Yemen, the Republic of Venezuela, Republic of South Sudan, and the Islamic State of Afghanistan, have suffered from serious famine and high price of food resulting from the shortage of provisions. The World Food Price Index, presented by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, for the end of the famine and poverty of developing countries, has risen consistently for 5 months from 91.0 points in May to 100.9 points in October 2020, and while the growth of the global grain production is 42.7 million tons in 2021, increased amount of consumption is predicted to be 52.4 million tons. In addition, humanitarian support from the international society has been decreased after the break of COVID-19.
However, it is not only them, but also advanced countries, which has been damaged by the lack of food caused by corona. Crack of supply chain due to the spread of coronavirus and radical increase of food price and global inflation caused by climate change have intensified the difficulties of lower income groups in advanced countries. According to Feeding America, the largest hunger relief agency in the United States, 13.2 million people in the United States have suffered from the lack of food, and 1 in 8 households could not have enough food. Even in France, ranked as second largest economy in Europe, a quarter of young men couldn't have skipping meal once or more.
In the aftermath of COVID-19, food problems have emerged not only in developing countries, but also in advanced countries. Food shortages would not have been easily resolved at any point in the future when COVID-19 gradually disappeared due to mass immunity vaccines. Now that the post-COVID-19 era is approaching, it's time to pay more attention to the world's food security and find a solution.
That's why we're here today. We need a variety of each country's opinion to overcome the food shortage in the post-COVID-19 era. Thank you for your participation in the Gaon International Model United Nations today, and I wish you good luck.
We would appreciate if you don't leave your seat until the end and enjoy the conference.
The 2021 Annual Gown International Model United Nations Conference will begin now. I'm Chun Se-yeon, who will be serving as your chair for today. Before the conference, I'm honored to have been elected chairman of this meeting and would like to thank all of the people who helped me to get such an opportunity. I promise to do my best to finish this conference successfully and to make a resolution that can be agreed upon by all parties. Delegates, welcome to the 2021 committee meeting. The agenda for today's conference is seeking multilateral cooperation for food security in the post-COVID-19 era. Before the conference, there will be a roll call. The chair will call out delegates. When your nation is called, raise your flag and state present or present and voting. Stating present and voting will prevent you from abstaining on substantive votes. Also, please note that further propositions should be made in the same way. Delegates of the United States of America,
Present and voting.
delegates of China,
Present and voting.
delegates of Canada,
Present and voting.
delegates of the Republic of Korea,
Present and voting.
delegates of Argentina,
Present and voting.
delegates of Brazil,
Present and voting.
delegates of Egypt,
Present and voting.
delegates of the Philippines,
Present and voting.
With 8 out of 8 delegates present, the committee has met the quorum. Now, we will move on to the keynote speeches. The keynote speeches should include background information and each country's stance to solve the problem. When the chair calls out a delegate, the delegates can approach the podium and begin their speech. Delegates of the United States of America, please approach the podium.
Let me begin by congratulating you on your inauguration as chairman of the General Assembly. I hope this general meeting will lead to good results under the leadership and management of the chairman. As the global pandemic deepens, various problems are emerging. The main issue to be dealt with at this general meeting is food security. Currently, some countries are implementing export restrictions on grain based on their own nationalism, limiting the movement of grain. It is time for countries around the world to work together to draw up a resolution that everyone agrees with. The US has maintained a relatively high food security index so far, but it was no exception to the damage caused by the global pandemic. Therefore, the US government introduced the American Rescue Plan, one of which was to increase the amount of food security aid. It would be nice if all countries could adopt this policy, but there are many practical difficulties. Therefore, it is necessary for the world to work together to prepare a joint resolution on food security issues rather than to solve them within the country. Limiting grain exports or closing borders will not greatly improve the situation. We need to ease restrictions on grain movement to ensure a more open approach to grain markets. Countries must provide insurance to support farmers' income due to concerns over the continuation of pandemic, so that adequate production of grain and various foods can be maintained. In this regard, Feed the Future, one of the U.S. government agencies, leads the global improvement of food security, reducing future food security risks at home and abroad, and improving food productivity. Our country needs to expand its scope of support for such food security agencies, and so do the UN. Farmers around the world now produce enough food to feed the world's population, but many people still suffer from lack of access to food because of the lack of an equal distribution of food. If all countries in the world share consumable food without being alienated, we will be able to maintain food security in the post-COVID-19 era. The U.S. is also committed to continuing its interest in the global food crisis and to providing as much support as possible at the government level. In order to deal with these international issues, the U.S. will lead the international community's cooperation, and our country hopes that the United Nations and other countries will actively cooperate. The U.S. hopes that the expansion of multilateral cooperation will contribute to the prosperity of future generations and solve the common problems of mankind. Thank you to the chairmen and all of the representatives who have listened so far.
Delegates of China, please approach the podium.
尊敬的议长，首先，我们代表中华人民共和国对第6届联合国模范大会议长陈世炎当选表示无限的祝贺。
Mr. President, on behalf of the People's Republic of China, I would like to express my infinite congratulations on the election of Chen Se-yeon as President of the 6th Model United Nations General Assembly.
为了这次大会的成功和国际社会的粮食安全，我们中国将采取严肃的态度和合作。
China promised that we take a serious stance and cooperate for the success of this General Assembly and the food security of the international society.
发展中国家依赖外国进口或援助，因此最先遭受粮食安全危机。
Developing countries were the first to be directly by this food security crisis because they relied on foreign imports or aid.
牛津赈灾会在饥饿病毒报告中警告说，饥荒问题比新冠肺炎严重得多。
Oxfam, a coalition of organizations against poverty and unfair trade, warned in its The Hunger Virus report that famine problems could be much more fatal than COVID-19.
中国政府认为，不仅是各国，这是世界面临的最重要的问题之一，为确保粮食安全做出了各种努力。特别是对于发展中国家的问题，我们正用忧虑和关心的眼光进行观察。
The government has made various efforts to ensure food security, thinking that this is one of the most important problems facing the world, not just each country, and look at them with concerns and interest.
中国通过“一带一路”事业，直接支援粮食危机的国家，通过为第三世界国家的平等合作谋求发展。
China has provided direct aid to countries suffering from the food crisis and become a partner in developing countries through One Belt and One Road business to pursue development through equal mutual cooperation with third world countries.
也有人担心，包括中国在内的多个国家的政府开发援助，会破坏消除贫困的纯粹意图，反而会给接受援助的国家带来巨大负担。
There are some voices of concern that official development assistance by several countries, including China, could undermine the pure intention of anti-poverty or put a heavy burden on the aid-receiving countries.
但是，中国正在推进发展中国家的贫困退却、粮食安全保障、农业治理等项目。
However, please note that China, above all, is carrying out projects to combat poverty in developing countries, maintain food security, and become self-supporting of agriculture.
中国希望把本国的优秀技术传授给那些使他们尽快之力。
China pursues to transfer its excellent agriculture technology to developing countries so that they can become self-reliant as soon as possible.
另外，如果中国协力这些国家合作，构筑连接世界的粮食基础设施，就能维持稳定的粮食安全。
In addition, if China works with these countries to build a food infrastructure that connects the world, it will be able to maintain stable food security.
但可以肯定的是，只有通过多个国家的合作，才能解决这个全球性问题。
However, it is certain that the food security can be solved through cooperation from numerous countries.
希望在这里的所有人持续关注和协助世界粮食基础设施建设。
I ask everyone here for your continued interest and cooperation in building the world's food infrastructure.
感谢至今为此一直倾听的议长和各国代表团。
Thanks to the President and all the delegations who have listened so far.
Delegates of Canada, please approach the podium.
Representing Canada, we sincerely congratulate you for being elected as the chairman of this conference. We believe your smooth operation and your deep experience to lead the conference into a success. We thank the chairman, the vice chairman, and the secretarian's hard work. We are carrying out the Canada Fishers Act for sustainable fishing since 2014 and are planning a symbiotic relationship between the fishers and the country through it. The Fishers Act needs regular communication with the fishers and a smooth economy cycle. But in the corona pandemic, both factors aren't going well. So we actively suggest the direct direction between the seller, the consumer, and the government for active fishing. Also, we suggest when we use such a method of marketing, we should save some fish for food assistance and assist the saved fish to countries which lack food. Worldwide, global food assistance is also needed for the whole world's food security. Canada has the ability to export and assist great amounts of grain each year. So, Canada is willing to assist other countries for the world's food security. But we think food security cannot be secured by only a few countries' assistance. So, we suggest food be secured. We suggest countries with relatively high food self-sufficiency, like the United States or Australia, should be at the head of the international assistance with our country. We, Canada, presented a sustainable food production and a global grain aid model for global development. Canada promises to fully support the Communist efforts.
Delegates of the Republic of Korea, please approach the podium.
My Honorable Chairman, Secretary General, and distinguished delegates, I would like to begin by thanking all of you for inviting this General Assembly about food security in post-COVID. It is difficult to convert land that has been used for other purposes into farmland. Environment will become increasingly barren. It will be difficult for people to even live in tropical areas anymore, and even if farming is possible in cold areas, it will take a lot of time to build infrastructure, so it is not easy to switch to the market immediately. Therefore, from a global perspective, I think it is efficient to increase the factors that can enable international cooperation, even if the total food production decreases. Therefore, we propose to promote global cooperation. In order to revitalize cooperation, the Korean government will actively support innovative seed development, improvement of cultivation methods using smart monitoring, eco-friendly farming methods using robots, and construction of on-site infrastructure through advanced technology. However, this is possible only with the cooperation of major grain-producing countries. I think a virtuous cycle of food security will be possible if countries where technology is advanced support technology and they can import grain smoothly. Advances in technology can also contribute to carbon neutrality. 25% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions comes from food production. However, efforts such as barrier seed development, solar power generation, and simplified irrigation channels can contribute carbon neutrality, thereby lowering greenhouse gas emissions. Korea repeatedly requests active cooperation from each country. For worldwide cooperation, Korea will sincerely support all areas that need our technology. Korea government promised to provide full support to build global food security. Thanks to the chairman and all of the representatives who have listened so far.
Delegates of the Argentina, please approach the podium.
Estimado señor secretario general y los embajadores que representan a todos los países, hola. Este es un embajador argentino.
Dear Mr. Secretary General and the ambassadors representing all countries, hello. This is the Argentine ambassador.
En primer lugar, quisiera felicitarlo por su investidura como presidente de la Sexta Asamblea en era modelo de las Naciones Unidas.
First of all, I would like to congratulate you on your inauguration as the chairman of the 6th Model United Nations General Assembly.
En esta reunión, quisiera expresar mi compromiso de cooperar activamente con las Naciones Unidas para contribuir a la simbiosis y la inclusión entre los países.
At this assembly, I would like to express my commitment to actively cooperate with the United Nations to contribute to symbiosis and inclusion among the countries.
Ahora nos acercamos la era posterior la corona.
We are now approaching the post-COVID era.
Al mismo tiempo, sin embargo, según un informe de la OMM, el año pasado fue el peor año en la historia del clima y muchas personas se enfrentaron a escasez de alimentos.
At the same time, however, according to a WMO report, last year was the worst year in climate history, with many people facing food shortages.
La FAO de la ONU dijo en declaración conjunta finales del marzo, la comunidad internacional necesita una discusión cercana para garantizar la seguridad alimentaria.
The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations said the international community needs close discussion to ensure food security in a joint statement at the end of March.
Por otro lado, Argentina ha implementado políticas como el de productos altas y respuestas conservadoras y que a largo plazo al COVID-19.
On the other hand, Argentina has implemented protectionist trade policies and long-term conservative, close responses to COVID-19.
Como resultado, Argentina se enfrenta actualmente a grandes dificultades, incluida una grave crisis económica.
As a result, Argentina is currently facing major difficulties, including a severe economic crisis.
En consecuencia, el gobierno promueve activamente políticas abiertas para expandir el comercio aliviando las restricciones.
Accordingly, the government plans to actively promote open policies to expand trade by easing restrictions.
Argentina es el país agrícola más del mundo en términos de exportaciones de alimentos.
Argentina is the world's largest agricultural country in terms of food exports.
Con base en esto propone la agricultura de presión con vallas de carbono, expandemos la agricultura donde también interesamos y diseminamos alimentos para animales.
Based on this, we will promote low-carbon precision agriculture, expand renewable energy utilization, and also disseminate feedstuffs.
Hasta ahora, los humanos han podido coexistir mientras superan numerosas crisis y despais globales acuerdos para inteligencia colectiva y la ayuda mutua a través de las comunidades.
So far, humans have been able to coexist while overcoming numerous global crises and challenges, supported by collective intelligence and mutual aid through communities.
Reafirmas la importancia del logro en un mundo libre, hambre y desnudo con todas sus formas.
We reaffirm the importance in achieving a world free from hunger and malnutrition in all forms.
Por lo tanto, Argentina insta encarecidamente a los países miembros de la ONU a emplearse eliminando las restricciones a la exportación.
Therefore, Argentina strongly urges the UN member countries to expand their policies easing export restrictions.
Una vez más, prometo que Argentina también contribuirá de manera constructiva al desafío global de garantizar la seguridad alimentaria con todos los miembros de la ONU. Gracias.
Once again, I promise that Argentina will also constructively contribute to this global challenge of ensuring food security with all the UN members. Thank you.
Delegates of Brazil, please approach the podium.
O secretário-geral you have presented Jakarta Paris. Parabéns pela inauguração do Presidente de Junção. Espero que seja uma Assembleia Geral em que a cooperação multilateral se espere por meio da liderança justa do Presidente.
Secretary General and representatives from all over the world, congratulations on Chairman Chun Se-yeon's inauguration. We expect it to be a general meeting where multilateral cooperation spreads with his outstanding leadership.
Apesar do fato de que a Organização das Nações Unidas para a Alimentação e Agricultura lançou recentemente uma cooperativa internacional chamada Federação Alimentar para responder a problemas urgentes de alimentação, por meio da cooperação internacional na área de finanças e tecnologia. As questões de segurança alimentar estão se tornando mais e mais sério.
Despite the fact that the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations recently launched an international cooperative called Food Federation to respond to urgent food problems, food security issues are becoming more and more serious.
É hora de mundo trabalhar junto para superar a crise unindo sabedoria.
It's time for the world to combine the wisdom to overcome the crisis.
Para isso, sugerir muitas 15 medidas de cooperação global para a segurança alimentar.
For this, we would like to suggest to implement the following measures to cooperate around the world for food security.
Em primeiro lugar, gostaria de apresentar algumas políticas que estão sendo desenvolvidas para a segurança alimentar em meu país.
First of all, I would like to introduce the policies that Brazil is implementing for food security.
A primeira política seguida por nosso país para a segurança alimentar é estabelecer uma agência dedicada.
The policy promoted by Brazil for food security is to establish a dedicated agency.
Recomendamos selecionar a segurança alimentar como dos principais setores anuais, apoiando o desenvolvimento nacional e estabelecer uma agência dedicada à segurança alimentar.
When announcing the National Development Plan, we recommended food security to be selected as one of the major sectors and established a dedicated organization to establish detailed strategies related to this.
Nós, o governo brasileiro, temos ajudado muito como designamos da Associação da Indústria de Alimento. Havia associações de alimentos derivadas como órgão de política dedicada à segurança alimentar.
Our Brazilian government has been of great help by designating the Food Industry Association and the Food and Beverage Association as dedicated organizations for food security policies.
Se precisar de informações sobre isso em qualquer tempo, vamos ser felizes em cooperar para alcançar a paz mundial.
If you need information on this at any time, we'll be happy to cooperate to achieve global peace.
Em seguida, sugiro que cada país implemente medidas para.
Next, I suggest you to expand your investment in the food sector.
Felizmente, o país de origem é variado como tendo conjunto de sua em torno a Alemanha por todo multilateral alimentar. Em meu relatório, conjunto da Organização das Nações Unidas para a Alimentação e Agricultura e a Organização para a Organização e Desenvolvimento Econômico.
Thankfully, Brazil was evaluated as having the conditions to become the world's largest food producer in a joint report by the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
O relator que se agreve as previsões da produção agrícola de 2015 a 2024 deve criar plantar os rendimentos agrícolas do Brasil continuar a crescer na próxima década.
The report, which contains agricultural production prospects from 2015 to 2024, predicts that Brazil's agricultural cultivation area and yield will continue to increase over the next decade.
Portanto, propomos expandir o investimento no setor de alimentos para o país e juros.
Therefore, we suggest you to expand your investment in the food sector to Brazil.
Prometemos que nosso país produzirá e exportará muito produto agrícola de melhor qualidade para resolver problemas de segurança alimentar. Implementará os programas de segurança alimentar com a multitude de atividades para o futuro.
To those who cooperate, we promise that Brazil will produce and export higher quality agricultural products to solve the food security problem and take an active and forward-looking stance to solve the food security problem.
Está por isso graças para todos e tecnologia agrícola para o mundo, trabalhando com todos os.
Food security policies that each country has been implementing this year have shown that no country can overcome food problems on its own without cooperation.
Como grande exportador de grãos, o Brasil participará ativamente da exportação de grãos baratos de tecnologia agrícola para o mundo, trabalhando com todos os países para minimizar o impacto do coronavírus e acelerar a recuperação econômica global. Obrigada.
Brazil, a major country in grain exports, will actively participate in inexpensive grain exports and agricultural technologies for the world, and will cooperate with all countries to minimize the impact of corona and speed up the global economic recovery. Thank you.
Delegates of Egypt, please approach the podium. Honorable Chair and delegates of each country, this is a delegate of Egypt. Before I begin to speak on behalf of the Arab Republic of Egypt, I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation for bringing together representatives from the United Nations to deal with the critical topic of food security at the international level. I would also like to thank the honor guards and delegates for their active interest in the agenda. And I promise that Egypt will do its best to discuss the agenda with the wise and sensible judgment of the delegations. Currently, the global village is experiencing difficulties that have not been experienced by COVID-19. By using this situation as a stepping stone for growth, we need to once again gather voices from each country on food security. The Arab Republic of Egypt has been developing the world's largest integrated food security system for grain storage since 2015, with the aim of preventing its vast wheat imports from causing unbalanced wheat distribution to other countries. It was developed by Bloomberg Grain to realize a business that reduces domestic wheat imports and increases wheat production in order to achieve a balanced global wheat trade volume. At this time, the Arab Republic of Egypt predicts that the launch of
African Continental Free Trade Area will allow member states to diversify trade to areas and escape price instability as trade volume within the Africa grows more than 53.2% due to import tariff exemptions. Nevertheless, the active participation of the country and cooperation at the international level are essential for the conclusion of a free trade agreement with countries around the world as members beyond 55 African countries. In response, we asked the UN to strengthen tax exemption in the event of trade between countries and to sign a new free trade agreement for food procurement through negotiation with the leadership. In addition, the Egyptian government will continue to probe over the world's food issue with deep concern and interest, reflecting on the spirit of the UN Charter. It will actively cooperate so that the United Nations in a changing era can develop further. In the international community, we ask for a lot of support for Egypt's current with balance with import and export policy so that Egypt can achieve both purposes of the world peace through this food security policy. Thank you very much.
Delegates of the Philippines, please approach the podium.
Ms. President, Mr. Secretary General, my fellow delegates, to all those who dedicate themselves to this noble mission of this institution. We celebrate the inauguration of Ms. President. We expect active support from the international community for food security by Ms. President's outstanding leadership. Because of the rice crisis that occurred in 2008, our country's food situation had been seriously worsened. Since the major reason of the rice crisis was rice-producing countries' export regulation and the soaring rice prices caused by this, we consider the current condition similar to this previous situation. Currently, because worldwide agricultural production has been reduced, and the rice-producing countries have reinforced regulation on rice export due to the overlap of COVID-19 and climate change, our country is once again going through a similar crisis on account of low degree of food self-support. Since we are aware that food security will be more important in the post-COVID-19 era, our country's position is to implement the policy of lowering the rate of dependence on imports and raise the degree of food self-support. What we consider most important for this is to cover the insufficient farmland. It is first to secure agricultural land where we can carry out agriculture in order to increase the goal agricultural production. To secure the least amount of farmland needed to achieve the goal of the degree of food self-support, we will begin with strengthening the regulations on changing the use of farmland. In addition, we will implement policies to improve irrigation canals, build facilities for increasing harvests, and add drying and storage facilities in order to prevent loss of harvested rice. International cooperation is not to alienate any countries, but to be free and prosper together. It is to cooperate for the common prosperity by considering the neighboring countries' situation. The population is continuously increasing, and the food production is getting worse due to climate change. The only solution of this emergency is international cooperation. The Philippines will keep being in unity with the international society and try our best to fulfill our responsibilities and roles for the UN's goal of food security.
The keynote speeches are now over, and we will proceed into the next step. We will have some time for each country to ask some questions to one country. If you have any question about other countries, please raise your flag. And the country which is given the question, please stand up. The first is the United States of America. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is Delegates of Egypt and Delegates of Argentina. Delegates of Egypt, you may begin.
Delegates of United States of America told us that in order to ease restriction on grain exports and promote more open trade between countries, each country should ensure farm income or sufficient production. However, countries with low food self-sufficiency, that is, countries with mostly grain imports or non-agricultural societies, are expected to fail to actively follow the U.S. position. Please answer specific plans for what measures can be taken to prepare for this situation.
We mentioned relaxation of grain exports because of the countries with relatively low degree of food self-support. Those countries cannot often support themselves with their own production, and therefore they suffer from lack of food. And also, there is no guarantee that this pandemic situation will not be repeated again. It is the reason why we need to be ready for another international crisis. Ensuring producers' income is not only for open trade, but also for growth of self-sufficiency rate of food. So, we think that our statement is equivalent to every single nation, regardless of their ability to feed themselves.
Delegates of Argentina, you may begin.
The United States of America said that in order to solve the food security problem, the world should work together to prepare a joint resolution. And I wonder how you will solve it if a small number of countries are excluded in the process of pursuing common interests.
Since it is the purpose of the UN to make a joint resolution that every nation agrees with, our country will try our best to avoid the situation of some minority countries being excluded. We will progress cooperation in a way that as many nations as possible can seek their benefits. However, when we seek common benefits, sometimes it is inevitable for some countries to fail to meet their expectation. And I think this is the reason why we need to collaborate together. If there are some minority countries being excluded, our US government promises to provide them a lot of support to introduce some policies or draft some resolutions. As the leading nation of international trade and multilateral cooperation between countries, our government promised again to lead the cooperation considering the balance between public profits and minority countries. And lastly, we hope that every single nation in the world will actively participate in our collaboration process.
Now it is time for the China. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is the delegates of the Republic of Korea and the delegates of Brazil. Delegates of the Republic of Korea, you may begin.
According to the IPCC 6 evaluation report approved by International Panel on Climate Change in August, if greenhouse gas emissions are maintained at the current level, the global average temperature is likely to rise 1.5 degrees between 2021 and 2040. If the global temperature changes like that, people will face more serious climate change than now, and agriculture production will naturally decrease, making it difficult to self-sufficiency of food, not only in developing countries, but also in developed countries. I would like to ask once again, if Ambassador thinks that expanding investment in agriculture in developing countries to help them become independent is a fundamental way to solve the food crisis.
Climate change has accelerated due to human greenhouse gas emissions, increasing the number of damage caused by flood or droughts. Jiangsu, China, also suffered great damage from the worst-ever flood. At the Climate Summit, or COP26, countries gathered to discuss solutions. Developed countries with capital and technology have been to come up with specific and practical measures, but developing countries are having difficulty reducing greenhouse gas emissions due to financial difficulties. China's position is not only to provide technology to developing countries, but also to provide financial or infrastructure support so that they can stand on their own feet through sustainable agriculture. Greenhouse gas reduction is not a problem solved by either developed or developing countries. China's efforts alone are difficult to achieve, so we ask for cooperation from other countries. China believes that the way proposed will have a very positive impact on food security and the environment in some way.
Delegates of Brazil, you may begin.
I have a question for Chinese embassy. China states that Chinese government has promoted a One Belt and One Road business to solve food security due to COVID-19. The current COVID-19 crisis is putting a strain on the economy of debtor countries, and as the global economy goes difficult, the voices of debtor countries asking China to delay payment deadline or to cancel debt is growing. How will China deal with this? In addition, China said that China has given a lot of help to developing countries through One Belt and One Road business. However, in most cases, China prioritized insecurity and military-related projects, and in the result, financially unsustainable projects were continuously or partially established. So China enjoyed the most benefits compared to developing countries which only owe China an unsustainable debt. In this regard, I'm curious whether China has really contributed to food security.
China is also feeling sorry for the difficulties of each country due to the recent economic downturn. Considering their situation, China can wait enough to overcome Corona and regain a stable economy. Also, China currently consumes as much agricultural products as it produces, so exports are not large. The One World project is still an incomplete project, and if the participating countries are experiencing excessive difficulties in the process, they can come up with a solution through dialogue with China. China pursues development in a form of mutual cooperation, not unilateral aid. If the parties affected by the business message directly China for dialogue, China is naturally willing to respond.
It is time for the Canada. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is delegates of the United States of America and delegates of the Egypt. Delegates of the United States of America, you may begin.
The ambassador of Canada said that the fishing laws adopted by Canada require constant communication with fishermen and a smooth economic cycle. Therefore, you mentioned that a direct connection between a seller and a producer should be legally guaranteed for active fishing. So, we wonder if you have come up with a specific legal way to guarantee that connection and what kind of a plan it would be.
In order to run successful communication between the fishermen and the government, a separate communication division will be installed in the fishery department. In order to run successful communication between fishermen and the government, a separate communication division will be established in the fishery-related department to establish an information communication network and a system that responses within 72 hours will also be established.
Delegates of Egypt, you may begin.
Delegates of Canada argued that stabilizing the communication network between the government, consumers, and producers can effectively reduce the amount of surplus fish and preserve the environment. Implementing this situation can solve the problem of fishing, but it is not enough to solve the problem of grain, a staple food in most countries around the world. What are the specific policies of the government to cope with these problems?
Stabilizing the communication network between the government, consumers, and producers is aimed for lowering the surplus fish. Canada has already presented a solution through international assistance for global food security through grain. We are trying to achieve international food security by assisting surplus grain to countries where food security isn't secured.
It is time for the Republic of Korea. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is delegates of the Philippines and delegates of the China. Delegates of the Philippines, you may begin.
We are aware that Korea possesses a great number of world-class technologies. However, we are curious if Korea has abundant financial strength and manpower to support developing countries and improve agriculture in Korea by using various advanced technology.
First of all, as Ambassador knows, Korea benefits from various agreements with developing countries like ours FTA, but also continues to exchange that provides Korean technology and food to trading countries. As such, Korea is taking the lead in introducing our technology by gradually lowering trade barriers one by one. Of course, even if Korea has grown a lot, it is too much to provide technical support to all developing countries alone right now. That is why we are here. Taking this opportunity, Korea wanted to create technical support for agriculture improvement and food security with capital and manpower obtained through global cooperation.
Delegates of China, you may begin.
Developed countries have the foundation or ability to have a foundation for greenhouse gas reduction, while developing countries do not. Korea said it would actively support technology to developing countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by realizing carbon neutrality, and said it hoped cooperation from major food producers would follow. However, can developing countries, which are difficult to think of first other than coal right now, realize carbon neutrality by providing only technology? I would like to ask if Korea believes that technological support alone will be enough for developing countries to realize carbon neutrality. Also, what action does Korea want developed countries to take that are more responsible than developing countries?
First, we have never thought that we will only support to developing countries' technology. In the end, the word active support for technology was just an expression of our commitment to help developing countries produce grains more effectively and supply stability by supporting technology and our determination to resolve the problem of food security. Also, as the ambassador said, it is true that there are many developing countries that are difficult to think of other fuels without coal. However, there are also many countries that have resources that will help develop technologies in the future, such as lithium in Argentina. Most developing countries will not be able to utilize resources due to lack of technology, even if underground resources are buried. I think we can support each country's technology for developing countries so that they can stand on their own feet and eventually lead to carbon neutrality. Ambassadors also asked about the measures that developed countries should take. As we have emphasized earlier, I think that is technical support for carbon reduction, not a criticism of carbon emissions in developing countries. In 2010, the UN Climate Change Convention agreed to create climate funds worth $100 billion a year in 2020. And if such agreements reappear, I think Korea, other climate change leader countries, and developing countries will naturally take more responsibility and contribution.
Now it is time for Argentina. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is Delegates of Canada and Delegates of Brazil. Delegates of Canada, you may begin.
The Argentine ambassador has expressed the position to proceed with the development of feed to reduce methane reduction. I would like to ask you, what kind of results have been achieved through the research so far, and what kind of plans will be used to build an eco-friendly livestock industry system in the future?
In 2018, Argentina conducted an experiment to feed cattle with a kind of seaweed called sea urchin, indicating that methane emissions can be greatly reduced for the first time. According to a report released in March this year, methane emissions were reduced by up to 82%, depending on the amount of seaweed fed into feed. In addition, when cows were given supplements made of garlic, allicin extract, and citrus, methane emissions were reduced by 30%. Furthermore, Argentina will make various efforts, such as the application and expansion of low-carbon precision agriculture and active utilization of renewable energy in order to promote sustainable agriculture and livestock industries.
Delegates of Brazil, you may begin.
I have a question for Argentine embassy. Argentina states that they are implementing an open political and foreign policy centered on trade. However, Argentina is in a severe drought this year, making Argentina hard to use ports and to only transport by land. I wonder how Argentina has planned to solve the trade problem hindered by this.
It is necessary to actively promote international cooperation to solve the drought and to recover the value of investments by improving the problems of land routes as soon as possible. Since a drought is a natural disaster, it is impossible for humans to recover it as soon as possible. So, I think that it is necessary to maintain the routes through eco-friendly places while minimizing the problems in the places that are currently being used a lot.
Now it is time for Brazil. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is Delegates of Canada and Delegates of Argentina. Delegates of Canada, you may begin.
Every year, the Transparency International shows the corruption index of each country. With the very integrity set to 100 and very corrupted is to 0. Brazil's corruption index in 2020 was 39, which is 94th out of 180 countries in the world. Based on this, we think it'll be hard for Brazil to expand investments in the future. So, we ask if there is a solution to reduce the reliability of the investments.
We are also aware of the seriousness of the problem of corruption in our country and are making great efforts to solve it. As a result, Brazil ranked second in the Corruption Prevention Ability Index of 15 Latin American countries, evaluated by American Society Council of the Americas. The Corruption Prevention Ability Index is a measure of pre-detection, punishment, and prevention ability for corruption behavior with a score 0 to 10 points. Given that we are actively improving corruption, I think we can guarantee the reliability of investing in Brazil's food sector.
Delegates of Argentina, you may begin.
According to a joint report by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Brazil is expected to develop its agriculture and livestock industries. I would like to ask you what factors and aspects of Brazil have enabled you to draw such a positive evaluation.
Brazil seems to have achieved this evaluation because of its best parent, abundant agricultural water, high-quality agricultural manpower, and corporate farmers with quality farmers with international competitiveness. Brazil also succeeded in tropical agriculture, science, and technology. Tropical agriculture is generally on acidic soil with low fertility. Brazil is we have developed these varieties suitable for tropical agriculture to foster Brazilian agriculture as a competitive agriculture. In this fact, it seems to have been well received in a joint report by United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
It is time for Egypt. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is Delegates of China and Delegates of the Philippines. Delegates of China, you may begin.
The Egyptian ambassador insists that the UN strengthen tax cuts when trading between countries and that each country sign a new free trade agreement. However, free trade agreements or FTAs can be disadvantageous to developing countries that are lagging behind in competitiveness compared to developed countries. It has the advantage of being cheaper when selling or purchasing goods overseas, but companies and industries that are not competitive can be hit hard by imports of goods from other countries. If that happens, it could be later poisonous to developing countries that are technically and economically lagging behind in all areas compared to developed countries. China would like to ask Egypt what specifically Egypt's new free trade agreement is and what solutions Egypt is devising for this problem.
First of all, free trade is a state freely trades without interfering with any individual or corporate trade activities. By producing and exchanging products that are relatively advantageous or of higher quality than other countries, it has the advantage of distributing profits between countries, not only helping the domestic economy, but also increasing overall production to help develop the global economy. Egypt will implement policies to revitalize free trade at the global level, focusing on stabilizing and equalizing food prices for food security around the world. Of course, we agree that FTA can cause inequality due to industrial imbalance between the two countries. However, based on the detailed goal of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to achieve food security and nutritional status improvement, economic inequality can be solved by expanding investment in rural infrastructure, agricultural research, and support services.
Delegates of the Philippines, you may begin.
We are aware that Egypt is building a system regarding food security and trying to enhance food production. However, you said that Egypt will improve food security through exporting more amount of wheat with advanced agriculture. We would like to know if exporting is the meaning of export that we know, and if so, whether Egypt is equipped with relevant policies and infrastructures to the extent of exporting wheat beyond improving its own country's food security, even though Egypt is an important country.
As the delegate said, the Arab Republic of Egypt is a large importer. However, in order to further increase food stability in Egypt and food security in other countries, the Egyptian government is implementing policies to reduce grain imports and increase domestic agricultural production by 4.1% every year. In addition, Egypt has established an agricultural development strategy aimed at creating new employment in rural areas and improving the income and quality of life for farmers. The first of the strategy is to reclaim a total of over 1,300 square kilometers of land. The second is the development of varieties for high altitude production. And the third is to develop agriculture through the adjustment of cultivation styles and nationalization of irrigation channels while reducing the cultivated land of grains that consume a lot of water. Further, the Green Project is being implemented through the Italian-Egyptian Debt for Development swap, which began in 2001. With IED's third phase project scheduled to be implemented by 2023, cooperative development will be achieved to improve the quality of Egyptian crops and the crop logistics system.
Now, it is time for the Philippines. If you have any question, please raise your flag. The order is delegates of the United States of America and delegates of the Republic of Korea. Delegates of the United States of America, you may begin.
Allowing countries to arbitrarily resolve common problems in each country will eventually increase the number of countries implementing policies for themselves, which can lead to another international problems. Furthermore, we believe that the close management of all rice produced in the Philippines and the dissemination of it only to its own country are not in accordance with the United Nations' fundamental objective of solidarity with the international community. In this case, the policies implemented to solve the problems may lead to other problems. So please tell us if you have any other measures or methods to prevent them.
The core of our opinion is not focused on having countries arbitrarily figure out the food security problem first. Our country belongs to a side that doesn't have food security in the present. Furthermore, the global food security means that all countries get to have food security, including ones that have serious food problems these days. So, the Philippines thought that implementing various policies for our country is the way that we can contribute to solving the worldwide food security problem. And this is the reason why our country came up with these policies. In addition, our country did not state that we intend to manage all rice produced in the Philippines in a closed manner and supply it only to our country. Of course, we have to conduct some protective trade to improve our own country's food security. However, as you know, the food security problem is the matter that human beings have to face continuously, and it's not a temporary problem. Therefore, we think that it is necessary to look at it from a long-term perspective. Currently, our country doesn't have much surplus products to export. In this situation, we think that focusing on solving our own country's food problem is logically natural. Additionally, we think that the best method for our country to contribute to international community is to improve food security first and reach the point to export food overseas without difficulty as fast as possible. Furthermore, as mentioned before, since food security is a long-term issue, we are sure that there will be a day when our country could participate more actively in this solidarity. Therefore, we do not have to worry about our country's policies leading to other matters.
Delegates of the Republic of Korea, you may begin.
It takes a lot of time and money to convert land, which used to be used for other purposes, into farmland. As Ambassador said, it will take a long time to tighten regulations, improve irrigation channels, and build facilities. But how do Philippines, which relies on imports, plan to prepare food during preparing agricultural land?
It is true that our country's final goal is to decrease the dependence on imports and to increase food self-sufficiency. It is also true that we are trying to implement a policy to convert land that was previously used for other purposes into a farming land. Furthermore, as Korea stated, we are aware that this process will take a lot of time. Therefore, we are considering to maintain a similar dependence on imports as it is now, just until we prepare the facility for increasing the food self-support and reorganize. After that, we are having a plan to decrease the amount of import gradually when our food conditions start to stabilize.
We'll now take time to finish the informal meeting and draw up a resolution. Please vote based on existing draft resolution prepared through consultation in the respective parliaments and draw up a resolution containing on opinions of each country. Now that a full clause draft resolution has been introduced, the chair will do a clause-by-clause revision and deletion of each clause. Delegates, please face the screen. First, maximize multinational cooperation for food security. A. Each country's food situation should be shared after investigation based on stocks, suppliers, and plans for proliferation over the next 20 years. B. In the case of the Philippines, Argentina, Brazil, and Egypt, which lack food export payments, 40% of imports from the United States of America, Canada, and China will be reserved for the next 10 years. Are there any objections to the clause? Since there is no objection, we will move on. Second, increase the food self-sufficiency rate of each country. A. Sharing and quantifying Chinese and Korean agriculture techniques and grain varieties with Egypt, Brazil, and the Philippines. B. By 2040, countries will plan and implement food production plans to increase their own food self-sufficiency rate to more than 40%. C. The Philippines implements a farmland conservation policy to increase food production and shares it. Are there any objections to the clause? Since there is no objection, we will move on. Third, supplement regulation on food exports. A. Countries with high food self-sufficiency cooperate to export to country with insufficient food. Are there any objection to the clause? Yes, delegates of the Philippines.
The current provisions are abstract, so we want to specify specific countries and figures. So, we propose to change the clause to Canada and the United States of America, where the food self-sufficiency rate exceeds 100%, cooperate to export at least 20% of food to countries lacking.
We'll put up a majority vote on clause with the chair's discretion. The Philippines has asked for clause 3-A to be changed. Countries that agree for the objection, please raise your flag. With 8 out of 8 countries would like to change the clause, it will be changed. Fourth, implement free trade on food imports and exports. A. Trade in grain is carried out free trade between Egypt, the United States of America, and the Republic of Korea. Are there any objection to the clause? Since there are no objection, we will move on. First action to be taken. 1. Maximize multinational cooperation for food security. A. Each country's food situation should be shared after investigation based on stocks, suppliers, and plans for proliferation over the next 20 years. B. In the case of the Philippines, Argentina, Brazil, and Egypt, which lack food import payments, 40% of imports from the United States of America, China, and Canada will be reserved for the next 10 years. Second action to be taken. 2. Increase the food self-sufficiency rate of each country. A. Sharing and quantifying Chinese and Korean agriculture techniques and grain varieties with Egypt, Brazil, and the Philippines. B. By 2040, countries will plan and implement food production plans to increase their own food self-sufficiency rate to more than 40%. C. The Philippines implements a farmland conservation policy to increase food production and shares it. Third action to be taken. 3. Supplement regulation on food exports. A. Canada and the United States of America, where the food self-sufficiency rate exceeds 100%, cooperate to export at least 20% of food to country lacking. Fourth action to be taken. 4. Implement free trade on food imports and exports. A. Trade in grain is carried out free trade between Egypt, the United States of America, the Republic of Korea. I'd like to thank for the delegates present for presenting opinions and a discussion. Lately, representatives of each nation, after returning home, when making a policy of each country, give cooperation so that this time of the convention of food security in the post-COVID-19 era will be reflected. This will end of the 6th 2021 Gaon International Model United Nations General Assembly. Thank you very much.